So let's take a look at how we can approach creating the geometry for the handle. And there are actually two different ways how we could do this. One would be maybe we add a cube and then scale it down, maybe try to position it correctly, and then we're going to extrude parts out. Kind of like this, move it over. For example, that could work. Or, and that's the one I would like to show you, is by creating a cross section and then drafting out the profiles, extruding half, and then using the mirror modifier to generate the other half. Okay, so first, I know actually that inside my, or on the image, you can see that this handle seems to emerge right from this center point. So in edit mode, I'm going to snap my cursor to the selected. Okay. And then in object mode, I can create another plane. Maybe scale it down and then rotate it 90 degrees. Maybe this lower edge here I can delete. And then I select Shift S, selection to cursor. There. And then the next few steps, I'm going to create this geometry by simply extruding it out. Maybe at this point I can also add a modifier and maybe turn on this triangular option that actually displays then the control points on the curve instead of just having this linear polygonal modeling cage. Those points are now displayed on the curve. So I can in wireframe mode, or actually in shaded mode, a little bit better maybe adjust the points in between. Okay, so maybe this one can remain down there. Okay, so at this point, for example, now I can maybe Shift D, A, select everything, Shift D, and then make a duplicate. And for example, I move this one down like there. And then I'm going to adjust everything accordingly. Maybe like this. And then let's turn this one on to see how successful this looks. It's actually pretty close. Yeah, okay. That's not too bad. So, little trick what we have to do is we have to fill in the missing faces. So I select edge by edge to have pairs. And then this way I fill that face. Because this way I can actually focus on creating just, I'm going to say that, kind of like the cross section. Now at the next step, I select everything and then, for example, press E and then extrude everything out a little bit. And this is like half the thickness. And the rest of those internal faces, like those, I'm going to delete. So I end up just with half of my handle, because I can now go ahead, add a mirror modifier. Of course, that one should be first. Again, the outer mirror modifier generates a solid full object, and then we're going to add a subsurface modifier to soften that geometry. Okay, and then from this step, for example, now I can start sculpting maybe my design a little bit more. So I see, for example, the handle is very flat on the top part. That means, well, maybe let's say those points I can move in a little bit. And the nice part with the mirror modifiers, as you can see, I only have to work on one half of my object. Maybe those I move down a little bit. Those edges I move up a little bit. So you can see that from a side I start shaping this a little bit. And oh yeah, I have an internal edge there as well. So you see this is solid, but it should be open. So I cut this open. Okay. And maybe here I will do the same. So those edges along the y-axis, I move forward. Those edges along the y, I move backwards. So I start rounding this slightly. Okay, looks okay. And then you can just continue playing, for example, or maybe I would like this one to be a little bit wider. Maybe here a little bit more narrow. Maybe here this one can go back a little bit and go in. Maybe this point could go down a little bit more to there. So you see, by just adjusting few points, I can work on quite complicated shapes. That's, again, that's just a premier application of subdivision surface modeling compared to starting from scratch with a NURBS approach. Specifically when you want to explore maybe ideas a little bit. Okay. That doesn't look too bad. Now, if we would like to be a little bit more explorative, maybe let's see what we can do if we add another loop cut. So you see, though, this way I started to tighten this corner or that edge. Maybe if here I would like that to be a little bit softer, I could move those down a little bit. And then, for example, I have a nice transition of kind of like a bigger rounding to, like in the back, to a more tighter edge in the front. And very often I just rotate my objects and then try to compare curvatures. So maybe in a top view, let's see how this one looks. No, that's quite okay. Good. Okay, so I mean, there are plenty of extra ways how we can, or how you can work with this one. If maybe the end part similar to the design inside the sketch, kind of like it has an edge here, and it seems also here seems to be a separation line and then an insert. So if, for example, we would like to sharpen that edge, we can just add a loop cut at the end, and then, okay, if that's our target, then we would have to move those points kind of like to there. So you see now how even there we kind of like tighten that a little bit. There. It's one possibility, and can maybe move this one over a little bit so it's a little bit arced. And actually I noticed right here the surface seems to dip in a little bit to there, and that is because those points here are more inwards. So I have to select all those and, for example, move them out a little bit. Yeah, no, this, for example, looks better. There you see now that it's a really nice flow, and then a nice flow this way. And maybe this one can go back just a notch. Okay, and then yeah, basically you can just continue fine-tuning the design, tweak it a little bit more. Maybe here this should go to there, to there. So I'm using my background image as a reference. And yeah, so let's keep it at this point. And when, for example, you would like to put those buttons in, again, that's where this whole object and edit mode, local space and global space comes in very handy. So we see there are certain buttons. So I can maybe, let's see how we can make those buttons quickly. Yeah, maybe just with a simple cube. So I added an object, starting with a cube. In edit mode, always scaling it down. Now it will be roughly there. The lower part I'm going to open. Maybe I add a subdivision surface modifier, level 2. Maybe 2 loop cuts along there. This button definitely is too wide, so maybe select this. And maybe 1 loop cut up here. So let's take a look. And then with local space, I can now use, for example, this blue or the green arrow, kind of like as a helper. You see this way or this way or this way, the button isn't really rotated, so maybe that it feels like being perpendicular to the surface. So I can use actually the green arrow kind of like as a helper for me from a side view to make sure that it's rotated in a way that it's nicely perpendicular. You can sink it in. Maybe this edge actually isn't tight enough. So okay, and I don't know, maybe let's go to there, do the same here. I would like those to move out a little bit. And you see also, because I'm in local space, my object is rotated, but I can simply rotate, move my geometry parts along the local orientation quite comfortably. So I don't have to eyeball, for example, at what angle I have to rotate it so it overlays with my sketch, because in object mode I just rotate the object accordingly, and then I have local space turned on, go into edit mode, and then I can move everything with the arrows along the local space. So then there we have, for example, our buttons, and actually I would rather like to have them a little bit deeper, and they seem to stick out really a lot. Okay, and for the sake of just, for example, proportion or placement, this is a really doable approach, because now I can quite easily move these parts around and say, well, maybe there it might look better. Are they maybe too close, or could undo it and move it back? So again, 3D modeling is not only about creating a finished piece, but just an extension of your design process. And that's a way how I work very often as well. I make some hand sketches, go into a 3D build, rough mock-up, kind of like what you maybe do in the wood lab with foam, to get an idea about scale, and we can work with that in mind exactly the same way in 3D as well.